Good evening. Happy Sunday to everybody out there. And I don't know if we have said, but we really appreciate you all joining us on your Sunday for this hour. We really appreciate you, and we respect the courage you have for joining us for these topics that are, to many people, extremely controversial. So, of course, we never shy away from speaking truth to power. So this is right up our alley. So we appreciate you all being here with us today. As always, we like to start by wishing you the best in physical, mental, and spiritual health during these times and during all times. And we also always start everything we do by acknowledging the struggles of the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere, from Alaska down to Chile. This is their land. If you're not an indigenous person, this land does not belong to you. Stop coming to protest saying whose streets are streets. These are not your streets. The streets, the air, the mountains, the hills, the valleys, the lakes, the rivers, the oceans, this is the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere's land, period. So we always want to acknowledge that, because justice requires that they one day will get their land back. And we certainly plan to do any and everything in our power to help them do that. And if that thought makes you uncomfortable, then you are a part of the problem, my friend. So we acknowledge the indigenous people, and of course, we acknowledge and respect the contributions of our African ancestors. African ancestors. That's who we are. We're not anything but Africans. We're not African Americans. We're not Black Americans. We're none of that. We're Africans. We've always been Africans, and we always will be Africans. There are Toyota cars being made in Kansas as we speak, and you don't call those Kansas cars. You still call them Japanese cars, even though they're made in Kansas. There are German shepherds walking around, and you don't call them US shepherds because they were born here. They're still German shepherds. So like Malcolm said, a cat has kittens in the oven. You don't call them biscuits. We are still Africans. The first church we established in this country was called the African Methodist Episcopalian Church. It's still called that to this day. It wasn't called the African American. It wasn't called the Black American. It wasn't called any of that. It was called what we are, Africans. So we use that term to designate all people of African descent on earth. And so we thank you for being here. If you're on Zoom, you're going to stay muted. And those who are on Facebook, you're able to make comments either way in the chat section on Zoom or on Facebook, and we will do our absolute best to address those at some point during the program. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We appreciate you again joining us today. And we'll just say that this topic that we're talking about is really not just about the flag. It's really about the elephant in the room. And that elephant is that for some extremely strange reason, everybody walks around acting like we all exist walking through life the same way. In other words, some of us are here because we have what we believe to be patriotic values towards this country. And I'm not talking about just people who are, wrapping themselves in the American flag. I'm talking about people who just subtly, like, yeah, this is my country. And yeah, I'm an American. All of that falls under the same category, because all of that dismisses the fact that this is stolen land. All of that dismisses the fact that this empire was built on the exploitation of people. So we all walk around with this myth dominant that all of us are here, we're all citizens of some great country that's supposed to represent freedom and democracy. And each and every aspect of that is a complete lie. So our purpose here for this next 56 minutes is to talk about that in clear terms, not abiding by anything, not refusing to say something because somebody's going to be offended. We couldn't care less if you were offended. We're offended every day. that we exist in this society. So if you're offended, join the club. And we don't organize and express ourselves based on what's acceptable to people. We organize and express ourselves based on truth and justice. So if you don't like what we have to say, you should be able to develop a cognitive argument to dispute it. If you can't do that, that's a signal to you that you should really try to dig deeper and understand the message. Okay. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get into it. As always, we always start with introductions, just so you know who we are. My name is Ajamu. I'm a longtime organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which is the organization sponsoring this event. It's our political party. I've been a member for 36 years, and I'll be a member as long as I continue to breathe in this life. And I've been able to fortunately organize for the APRP on 3 continents and the Caribbean. And with me, as always, I have my outstanding daughter, Shakura, who grew up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute program. And she is now a PhD student in communication public health who organizes outstanding events around African women's health where she lives. And I could not be prouder of her and could not be prouder to participate in these weekly seminars with her. The All African People's Revolutionary Party, our objective is one thing, Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. So the book you see there, the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, written by Kwame and Nkrumah in 1968, calls for the creation of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and that the AAPRP would be the governing body for the All African Committee for Political Coordination, which is the consolidation of all revolutionary Pan-African political formations on the ground in Africa into one entity. So this is not just a theoretical thing. I mean, if you don't study the world, you think, well, oh yeah, that's a great idea. It's not just an idea, it's a practical reality. And all of these emblems you see there are various organizations on the ground in Africa today who are fighting for one unified socialist Africa. The Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, or what you call South Africa, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau, the Democratic Party of Guinea, the Azanian People's Organization in Azania, the Amilcar Cabral Ideological School in Nigeria, the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists in Zimbabwe, the All African People's Revolutionary Party. All of us see ourselves as one entity fighting for one unified socialist Africa. So that's who we are. Chapters all over the African world fighting for this worldwide fighting force of to achieve Pan-Africanism and wipe away capitalism and imperialism once and for all. And that's who we are. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Shakura to get us started.
Okay, greetings everyone. Thank you, Daddy. So I definitely want to, call your attention to the fact that despite never ceasing efforts by everyone from the Democratic Party to the NAACP, for 250 years that lie the framers of this country's constitution are our quote unquote founding fathers continues to be preached. These people were slave owners. Thomas Jefferson owned close to 70 Africans as property. These people who are the founding fathers were also noted that they never wrote their constitution with Africans in mind or colonized people in mind. To them, Africans were considered lower level animals. So for 250 years, people consistently attempted to rewrite history and submerge the truth. The absolute truth is this country was built on the backs of Africans. And just to give you some examples of how that has metaphored itself and came to light, insurance companies, for example, became really popular because slave owners took out policies on Africans as human beings since we were seen as their property. Another example would be the Master Lock Company. I will always remember this example because when I was in middle school, I had to buy a combination lock for my locker. And my dad explained to me then 15 something plus years ago, that the whole reason that company is as well known as it is today, whether you buy combination locks or whether you buy locks with key, is because that company was born because they were the same people who decided to make the shackles that Africans were bonded in, excuse me. So it's never been our country, air quotes. That's never been a thing that has been applied to colonized people or to African people. And it never will be our country. We are kidnapped Africans fighting for Africa to be free, united, and socialist. And in conjunction with that fight, these lands need to be rightfully returned to the indigenous people who they were stolen from. Anything else is science fiction, fantasy, and the imagination of people who refuse to face reality. Next slide, please. Okay, so just if we're thinking about it from a different standpoint, there's absolutely no way for peace and justice loving people to justify the existence of this country. So I just want us to really, really think about that. This is, you know, there's so many narratives that are shared with us where we think about if we're quote unquote identifying with this American identity and we celebrate the 4th of July, then we have, you know, every power to look at people equally and things like that. But there's a lot of contradictions in that. And some of examples of those contradictions are you cannot serve God and the devil at the same time. You also cannot serve justice and the US capitalism system at the same time. This means you cannot call yourself an American, and you certainly cannot bow down to any flag like the US flag that represents oppression and subjugation of humanity. So I want to repeat that. The flag represents oppression and subjugation of humanity. So if you do any of these things in that way, then you are a part of the reason we are continually oppressed, because you stand for those beliefs. You stand for the ability that you believe that people should be oppressed. You stand for the ability that you believe that patriarchy and capitalism, those are the ways to go. That's what it means when you celebrate the 4th of July. And that's also what it means when you call yourself an American. So I just really want us to think about our identities and how we really kind of conversate that narrative as we continue to share that with other people, especially because the so-and-so called holiday is coming up. If you do any of these things in any way, you are part of that reason. And so you're continuing to uphold the institutions, symbols, and ideologies that oppress us every single day. Now, you might ask yourself, the pictures on the bottom make sense, but why is the picture on the top in this slide? Well, actually, it is continuing to support the very same narrative that I'm trying to push to you today. I like to draw your attention to the top picture and helping you to understand that this picture is a true representative of the US flag standards and the United States of America. This picture also argues and supports the country's standpoint that is representing the same oppression and that subjugation of humanity. And if you don't see how that picture is displaying that, allow me to help you see it with some different type of lenses, if you will. I particularly love this picture because it supports everything so well, and that the picture is actually very deep. There's so many narratives that come from this. The two boxes communicate that through white supremacy, AKA supporting US standards and supporting the American flag and all those things that we just talked about, that the box on the left, the African, is more socially accepted as a single mother, and she could have relationship issues, or her partner could be a deadbeat of some type, or something else that explains why her partner is gone. But we as consumers who might need a way to carry our infants should not assume that this African woman is in a committed relationship. That's what that box is communicating. And I want us to really think about how materials that we buy and things when we go to the store, the aisles that we look in, Target, Home Depot, whatever stores you shop and affiliate with, this is all to protect that United States capitalism, quote unquote, American dream shit, for lack of a better term. So I want us to really, really think about that on a really heavy level. It also communicates that from this standpoint, while white supremacy helps us communicate that white people can manage relationships so much better and have their stuff together, Africans are unwilling to have what is called qualified or healthy relationships. And again, like, I'm so glad that the person who sent this picture to me sent it with the two boxes like that, because I just find it fascinating that they couldn't even find a brother to pose with the African. That's very interesting to me. The last point I want to draw to your attention is when we socially think about family, air quotes, we subconsciously think of white people. And that is still protecting this white supremacy American standard. Just like we think about Jesus Christ, for example. We are socialized to think that white people, because they are functioning members in society, and this is clear, that they have a better way of managing relationships than us. So as that relates to how we are looked at in this world, as that relates to our values and our beliefs, it is very clear that in order to be an American citizen, you have to protect what it means to be American, which means you support oppression, you support patriarchy. It means you are anti-homophobia. It means you are anti-Muslim. It means that these are all the things that you are doing because that's what a quote unquote good American does. And so I guess the question I'm posing to all of you today is, how do you swim against that stream and figure out what your new narrative is? Because if you are against all of those things, then that means you're not interested in supporting that. And that means you too see a problem with the top picture that I posed to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shakura. So let's talk about this flag, just using it as a symbol. It's a symbol of this country, right? So let's talk about it. And the first thing that we want to point out is if you go back to the protests that were led by our brother Colin Kaepernick when he was in the National Football League here, there was a lot of discussion. I'm sure most of you recall it. And he had to do a lot of explaining during that time, 4 years ago, that he was protesting police terrorism against African people. He was not protesting, and this is how he framed it. He was not protesting against the military. He was not protesting against the flag. And there was a lot of talk about how it was important to separate that distinction because we needed to respect the people in the military. We needed to respect the flag. And this was almost adopted as a standard formula for which we should see this entire situation through. And it was very rarely questioned in any way, form, or fashion. So what we want to say today is, and it doesn't matter whether Colin understood this or not, when you're protesting police terrorism, what you're protesting is the American capitalist system and everything that goes along with it, because police are simply a manifestation of this system. If you understand where police come from, and I'm sure at this point, most of us right now have some understanding of that police departments evolved from the enslavement posses that terrorized our people after the Emancipation Proclamation. So there's no way, if you understand that you can say, well, it's just a question of some bad apples in the police departments. This is an institution that was created to terrorize our people, and it just simply continues to do what it was created to do in the first place. So it is an institution of this system. So you cannot separate police terrorism from everything else about America because it's a part of that entire process. The flag, the military, all of that. And to say that it's not about those things is a capitulation because you either don't know how to explain it or you're afraid of the consequences of talking about it in the correct way that it should be talked about. So let's talk about the US military, for example. You know, this is really a pitiful shame, the way we allow this lie to exist and continue. And the only rational reason why we do this is because we know people in the military. I mean, what kind of logic is that? We know people in the military, so we allow millions of people to be killed by them. We allow millions of them to kill themselves because they can't live with the terrorism that they've been forced to carry out. About 25 of them kill themselves each day, you all, in this country, so-called veterans. We allow all of that to happen. We allow them to be on freeway off-ramps begging for food and money because our brother was there, our sister was there, our friend was there, our whatever it is. I mean, that's absolutely absurd when the irrefutable truth is the US military has not fired a single bullet to advance justice for you or anybody else in the world. That has never happened, you all. And stop telling this lie that it happened during World War II. The US didn't even get involved in World War II until 8 years after Hitler was in office. 8 years of him terrorizing the entire European continent and expanding that and supporting terrorist efforts in other parts of the world. Then the US got involved. So clearly they didn't have a problem with fascism. You couldn't say that because they knew he was a fascist from day one. So that's a lie, especially since the US military fighting in Europe against Nazi Germany still maintained segregation against Africans in the US military. In fact, during World War II, when Nazi soldiers were captured, they were permitted to eat in the same mess halls as US white troops, white US troops, whereas African troops in the US military fighting the Nazis were never permitted to do that. So please spare us with that lie that, oh, they were fighting against fascism in World War II. This country has never fought against fascism. It's always been the purveyor of fascism. This is the country that supported apartheid Azania, South Africa, since for the last 80 years, 90 years, 100 years. This is the country that has been the most foremost ally behind the Zionist state of Israel and its exploitation and oppression of the Palestinian people. This is the country that stole this land from the indigenous people. And when people from this country tried to criticize the apartheid leaders in the United Nations in the 1960s, the apartheid leaders told them, we got our model for it from you in terms of how you've treated the indigenous people in the US. So this country is not against fascism. I mean, that's an absolute joke. It is the purveyor of fascism. And the US military is the tool it uses to carry that out, to carry out its violence and destruction in the world. Hundreds of thousands, 1.2 million people killed in Vietnam during the invasion of Vietnam and the 10-year occupation war there. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and Afghan people killed during those invasions of those countries. For what? For what? You were told it was to stop terrorism. And clearly that was not it. I'll tell you what was accomplished through all of that happened. The Caspian oil pipeline was built in the former Soviet Union territories above Iraq and Afghanistan. And the militia groups, the warlord groups in Afghanistan were wiped out. And so that enabled, according to even your own Federal Bureau of Investigation today, 50% of the heroin in this country comes from Afghanistan. Those were the things that were accomplished. But other than that, the US military has accomplished nothing. You feel no safer today from these so-called terrorist attacks than you did before 9/11. And you can't feel any safer because those efforts did nothing to make you safer. In fact, if anything, you're more unsafe now than you ever have been because the majority of people in the world are sick of being bullied, harassed, and exploited by this terrorist regime. And it doesn't, when I say terrorist regime, it doesn't matter who the president is, because whoever that person is, their responsibility is to uphold the hegemony and terrorism and capitalist dominance of the worldwide capitalist network, which is led by the United States of America. So if you are in the U.S. military, if you were previously in the U.S. military, if you got relatives in the U.S. military, they are fighting on the wrong side of history. They are on the wrong side of history. And I understand it. They needed a job. They needed an income. That's why they joined. I get it. Totally understand that. But let's just say that. That's why they're in the military. Don't bring all these lies along with it that they're fighting for freedom and democracy. That's not happening. It never has happened. It never will happen. So that has to be clearly understood. Anyone in the U.S. military is a trained, paid mercenary for international imperialism. And nobody can refute that statement. Nobody. So all of this, if you understand it properly, it makes the U.S. flag clearly an enemy of humanity, certainly an enemy to African people. Shakur gave just some quick examples of how this system was never built for us. So why should you be expected to respect this flag, this Constitution? None of that was prepared for you. If you're African or you're indigenous, or even if you're poor white, it was never prepared for you. So you have to be out of your mind to respect that. My parents trained me to respect people that respect me. None of those things have ever respected me. None of those things and none of the institutions they represent, the military, whatever, have ever respected me. Understand that when our people rise up and resist the system and oppression in the streets, it's the U.S. military that's called upon through the National Guard to repress them. So it's It's mind-boggling that people can still promote this analysis that we have to support our troops, talking about anybody that's in the U.S. military. No, I don't support any of y'all in the U.S. military, not at all. And I encourage you to get out as quickly as you can. I'll help you find a job if that's what it's about. But I cannot support what you're doing because you're on the wrong side of history fighting against justice for the majority of people on earth for multinational corporations. And I know you have to know that. There's no way you can be confused about that. I know you know that. So that's what we're talking about. When we talk about the US flag, it's a rag, or as Kwame Toure said, toilet paper. That's what it is. In fact, someone, a European friend that I have, when he saw the title of the event today, he wrote, with recent events and our total consciousness now of the value of toilet paper, I'm offended that you would even equate that flag with the value of toilet paper. And I have to agree with him 100% on that. So no question, the US flag is an enemy to all peace and justice loving people. You know, you have this 4th of July coming up, and somebody was on the street the other day and they were handing out little flag pins, and he reached out to give me one. I don't want that. He's like, you don't want your flag? I'm like, it's not my flag. And he said, well, wait, you won't accept the US flag? I said, I'll accept it to burn it. I burned hundreds of them. He's like, you burn our flag? I'm like, yeah, if you want to come around on the 4th of July, you can see me do it again. I mean, that's what I do to them. I burn them. So that's a symbolic therapeutic gesture for me to perform that. My father was in the military during the Vietnam War. And so when he died, they gave us a flag, and they tried to give it to my mother. The Marines came out there. They tried to give it to my mother, and she told them, I don't want that. And so I started laughing at that, but then I thought, oh, wait a minute, that's a huge flag. So I said, I'll take it, sir, give it to me. So he gave it to me, and I cut it into 500 pieces, and we had an African student conference a couple of months later, and we burned every piece of that flag. So I'm proud to say that. Yeah, we burn them. We'll continue to do it. That's the only thing it's good for. So what all that means, you all, jokes, truth, whatever way we articulate it, is that there's no way you can be for justice and stand with the US flag. It is just not possible to do both. As Shakur said, it's not possible to serve two masters. The US flag represents injustice, exploitation, and oppression, and everything about the US. And people are talking about removing the symbols of slavery, like these statues. That's great. But the only way you can really remove the symbols of slavery is this entire country has to be obliterated. That's the only way it can really happen. Anything short of that is just performance art. So let's talk about this question of patriotism first, because a lot of people are confused about this. You know, when these people talk about their patriotic Americans, like a lot of people, they look at that, and because of that, they come to the conclusion that, well, you know, clearly patriotism is a negative thing. And so to that, we just want to make sure that everybody understands that the history of Europe is not the history of the world. Because patriotism and nationalism is a negative thing from a European standpoint does not mean that it's the same for everyone else. For colonized people, nationalism is a positive thing. It's a prerequisite for mass liberation. For people who represent the system in power or who identify with the system in power, nationalism is a negative thing because it demonstrates and represents nothing except those people continuing to dominate the world. Or as the great son of Africa, Sekou Toure, said, when Europe devolved, if you study the history of Europe, Europe devolved from nations into states. If you look at what happened in like Czechoslovakia, for example, or Yugoslavia or the Soviet Union, this is an example of what Sekou Toure was talking about. These places devolved into these states that had, you know, this micro-nationalist perspective, like all we care about is us, and engaged in these wars against each other to maintain their territory and do all of those things. That's the history of Europe. That is not the history of the rest of the world. For African people, it's the opposite of Europe. So we had a nation that Europeans came in and colonized and created these states. right? So ours, for their own interest, not for ours. So our struggle today is to eliminate these states and create one nation, one unified socialist Africa, which is the exact opposite of Europe, which is moving away from that. Like the whole question about Brexit is an example of Europe moving away from the concept of one unified entity. So they're not colonized. We're colonized. So other than Ireland, they're not colonized. We are. So claiming our national identity as Africans is a part of the process for us to fight for our national liberation. So nationalism is a positive thing for us because it's not anti-human and it's not about dominating any other people. It's about us coming together so that we can become free. So that has to be clearly understood. So nationalism for oppressed, colonized people is a good thing. Nationalism for people identifying with the dominant structures is a bad thing. That's always the case. So understand that. And then understand that because of that, US patriotism on any level is always reactionary and bad. On any level is always reactionary and bad. From the people you see in these pictures, Confederate flags, white power, from that level, all the way to, well, I just want something better in my country. I want my country to live up to the values that it was created under. All of that serves the same end. It's just the latter example just makes people feel better, like they're not as bad as the former example. But you are as bad because the country has always lived up to what it represented. It's always lived up to that. It was based on oppression and exploitation. Everything here is stolen. Look around you right now, wherever you are, everything is stolen. Whatever materials are in your house right now, they were made from natural resources that were stolen. Whatever you see in front of you is stolen, you all of it is stolen. So no level of US identification is anything except reactionary. And the only reason why they have these holidays like the 4th of July is to try to continue to convince you to overlook that reality and to think that, well, I can identify on some level with this. I can, some way I can, and the way I can do it is I can say something like, yeah, the founders are wrong, but let's live up to what they had in the Constitution. They didn't write that Constitution for us. So that Constitution, like the flag, is toilet paper. It means nothing to us. And we can't start from that point. We can't start from that vantage point. We can only start from the fact that all of this wealth here is here because Africa has been exploited. So we have to get our wealth back. Someone asked me, well, if you don't like it here, why are you here? I said, I'm only here so we can get what you stole from us back. Then the minute that happens, trust me, I'll be long gone. And you probably will too, because the only reason why you have patriotism for any of this is because of all the wealth that's here, but the wealth doesn't belong here. So the minute it goes back to where it rightly belongs, since you're so opportunistic and you're so just self-centered and everything that you're about is about your own self-interest, there's no way you'll want to be here. So that's what we're talking about. When we say US patriotism, it's always reactionary, y'all. It's always negative. So we ask you today to make declare and make a statement that you're not going to be down with this backward reality. You're not going to be down with this American identity, that you're not going to promote and advance that notion. And we want to remind you that the best minds that we have had as a people, illustrated by some of the people you're seeing here, there are obviously many others, Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, W.B. Du Bois, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, Assata Shakur, Carmen Pereira, Teodoro Gomez, all of these people, Mbalia Kamara, Kwame Toure, all of these people, none of them called themselves an Americans. All of them said that this American identity has to be crushed and destroyed, and that justice has to come to the people who are exploited by that. So if you really want to be down with truth and justice, you have to take on that position, that you have to support colonized, oppressed humanity. And even for those of you that are white, if you really want justice, y'all have to be first in line in taking this position. I am not an American. Say it to yourself. Say it out loud. I am not an American. There is no such thing. I am a human being fighting for justice. For me, I'm an African fighting for one unified socialist Africa. Whatever way you have to do it, you have to make that your priority and use these backward reactionary propaganda tools like the 4th of July to illustrate that for people. And you have to interrupt those things when they happen. That's why people burn flags. It's a symbolic effort to interrupt this propaganda that you have to respect a symbol that stood for oppression against humanity for all these hundreds of years. That's the reason for burning. It's symbolic. That's why people, why are you burning that? What does that do? Because we want to plant the idea in people's minds because we understand ideology directs action. So if we can get you to think about something, then that's the first step towards getting you to act on something. So that's why we do that. So we have to interrupt this process where we all walk around like this is okay. This is not okay. And then decide that you're going to become an agent for change, which means joining organizations. We say it all the time. We will never tire of saying it. Organization decides everything. And the problem we have now is most people are not involved in organizations. And a lot of people who are in organizations are not seriously committing their energy and participation to building those organizations. That's what we need. We need people to commit to do that. You know, everybody, I wrote an article today, I posted on my blog, and I talked about how with everything else in the world, we adopt a position where anybody who has an opinion about it, we're looking at what their credentials are before we evaluate whether we want to accept their opinion or not. If we had a problem with our heart was not working properly, and it was determined that we probably would have to pursue open heart surgery. And there were two people there talking to you about it. One was an experienced heart surgeon who had, clear credentials to perform effective heart surgery. And the other person was someone who just felt like they wanted to talk about heart surgery. Nobody hearing this right now would say, well, I want to choose that second person, not the first person. So we always look at the quality of the people, the credentials, when they're talking about something. But for some odd reason, when it comes to our people's liberation, we abandon that principle. And now everybody that has vocal cords, bad breath, and a computer has an opinion on what our people should be doing. And as long as their opinion lines up with what we want to believe, we'll support that opinion, even though they can have absolutely no idea what the hell they're talking about. And that's a real problem for us. And it's a real sign of people who are not engaged in organizing work, are not in organizations. And most of the people expressing these crazy opinions are not in organizations, just individuals with a keyboard and no accountability to anybody but themselves. And I don't know about you, but I don't trust people like that talking about that, because if you don't have any accountability, you can say and do whatever you want. You might be trying to say something so you can find a way to profit financially. I don't know. Usually that's what it is. So I don't trust that. I trust people who dedicate a commitment by being accountable to their community, by organizing in processes that are public, that people can plug into, that people can look at them and say, I know what this person is doing. They have a track record of making a contribution, and that's good. So that's what we need. We don't need individuals, because even if you have the solution, you're going to die. So what good is it to us that you have the solution if you die and take the solution with you? The only way your solution is going to mean anything to us, even if you know everything and we don't know anything, is if you share that with people and you help them figure out how to develop your vision so that we can all collectively carry it out. So no matter how you slice it, organization is essential. So we've got to have people do that. And again, along with that, you have to have political education. You have to have community defense components. You have to have working groups designed to combat capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, homophobia, all these things that do nothing to serve our people's interests. I just, it blows me away why we keep talking about these things. We talk about these things more than we talk about the real source of our problem, this capitalist imperialist system that's built on our backs. When the police pull you over, they are not asking you, are you cis or are you gay? They are killing LGBTQ African people at a higher rate than they're killing those of us who identify as cis or what you call heterosexual. So clearly that has nothing to do with police terrorism against our people. So I just don't understand why we keep talking about that. And again, for those that keep talking about it like that, that's a sign to seasoned people like myself that you are not engaging in organizing our people. Because if you were, you would realize how ridiculous it is to focus on those things. We got to get our people together. We're at war. We are at war. We got to get all our people together to fight this war together. That's what we need to do right now. Then after we become free, then we can talk about a whole lot of things. But right now, we need a united front. You cannot identify any struggle for national liberation that did not have a united front. When China, which is a world power today, if you didn't notice, when they had their revolution, which was successful in 1949, they had a united front. China united, the Chinese Communist Party united with the Kuomintang, which was the right-wing bourgeoisie reactionaries in China. Those are the people that after the revolution, the Chinese revolutionaries drove them out, and these Kuomintang people are the people that created the country you know today as Taiwan. But before the revolution was successful, they had a united front. And if you study history, if you have a political education process, you would know this already. But if you don't have that, that's why you don't know it. And so that's why you don't understand why a united front is absolutely necessary. So these are the things that have to happen. And then the last thing that definitely needs to be said is we need to honor our true troops, the people who really did fight for us. We need to honor the people who really did sacrifice for us. I'm sick and tired of hearing about, we need to honor the US troops. Those people have done nothing for me. I grew up in the inner city, terrorized every day of my youth. They did nothing to make me safer. In fact, one of those terror memories I have was when I was a child in San Francisco, and we were in Hunters Point, and tanks rolled down the streets because it was after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and our people were tearing up the community. And these tanks, these National Guards people came in the community to repress our people. And I was a little boy, and I remember my father just asking one of them a question, him just having got out of the military in the Vietnam conflict just a couple of years before that, right? I remember him asking one of these terrorists a question, standing on the streets in San Francisco with guns aimed at us. And I saw the man point the gun at my father and yell at him to get back. And these are the people you're trying to tell me I need to support and respect. You got to be out of your mind. I'm not going to have any respect for any of that nonsense. Instead, I'm going to respect the people who actually made concrete contributions to my life and the life of my people as I know it today. And here we have just some examples of them. And it's an absolute shame that most of these people, most of you all have no idea about. And that's a shame. And you should take it upon yourself after today to find out who these people are, because these are people who paid tremendous prices for us. Clearly, Assata Shakur, our sister who is living peacefully in Cuba, who they continue to harass today, fought in the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army for us, and has been in Cuba for going on 40 years now, for 36 years, in peace and justice, cannot come here, is still public enemy number one in this backward country. Clearly, that's someone who we should support and get behind. Clearly, our brother from Cuba, Brother Fernando Flark, to the right of her, most of you don't know who he is. He came here undercover in Miami to try to find out how to stop terrorist US attacks against Cuba, because he's a patriot of the Cuban Revolution. And because of that, he was placed in prison in this country 16 years. And now he's back in Cuba, continuing to fight for Cuba's socialist revolution, as he should be. A clear hero in human history, Sister Teodora Gomez on the right, who just gave a presentation in our African Liberation Day program last month. She is a sister who fought on the front lines with guns against the Portuguese during the PAIGC's anti-colonial struggle to run the Portuguese out of Guinea-Bissau in the early 70s. And she is still today a foremost symbol of resistance against white supremacy, against capitalism and imperialism, and the subjugation of Africa and African people. She is still today a leader of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, and still today, if you look at the video just last month, calling for Africans to unite all over the world for one unified socialist Africa, a true heroine for justice. To the left, under Sister Asada, Brother Sekou Neblet, a singer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee singers. When the Ku Klux Klan terrorized our people fighting for justice in the South, he was one of the people who sang to uplift the spirits of our people in the face of terrorism. And then he joined the Black Panther Party, became a field marshal for the Black Panther Party. Then he joined the All African People's Revolutionary Party and moved to Ghana, West Africa, where he is in this picture and where he is today. And I know him because when I go to Ghana, which is often, I stay at his house. That's my big brother. I love and honor this brother. And he is still militantly organizing for Pan-Africanism at almost 77 years old today. And we know nothing about him. This is the person you should honor and respect. That's who you need to give your honor and respect to, these people. Next to him, Brother Bob Brown, one of the founders of the Illinois Black Panther Party chapter, one of the people who is responsible for Fred Hampton being in that chapter, went on to become a longtime organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and now the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC, still active in that. One of the people who laid the foundation for the work that we do today, still alive, still active, still organizing. We don't know who he is. We should know. That's one of the people we should give respect to. There underneath that, you see the picture of some of the people at the party for Huey Newton in 1968. The brother with the shades and the big afros, Brother Sekou, who's in the picture above that. Brother Jamil Abdullah Alameen in the small picture has been in prison for about 15 years now, formerly H. Rap Brown. Been in prison, they said he killed 2 Gestapo police officers, framed through modern day COINTELPRO. We should be doing everything we can to fight for his release. And they are doing everything they can to continue to terrorize him in prison and keep him behind bars. He is someone for the last 50 plus years, you all, has represented the integrity of our struggle from his time as chairperson of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to his conversion to Islam and his community defense work in Atlanta, Georgia, US, and his imprisonment as a result of it. You should know who he is. We should support him and respect him. And the picture next to him, Dr. Martin Luther King, Brother Kwame Toure, and Brother Moukaku Dada, still active, still working for Pan-Africanism, still working for justice today, 2020, living in Atlanta. You should support this brother any way you can. We should take care of our troops. We should support. You should contact Brother Mukasa. You should contact Brother Sekou. You should contact Sister Teodora. You should go to Cuba and meet Sister Asada and Brother Fernando. You should contact Brother Bob Brown. You should at least, if nothing else, say, let me, Grubhub you lunch today. You should support our troops. And I'm saying that because that's what I do. I support these people that I'm showing you now. Any way that I can. I support them financially. I support them materially. I support them spiritually, whatever way, because these are my troops. These are the people that fought for me. And my daughter, who's on here with me, can correct me if I'm telling a lie. She has grown up knowing about all these people, and she's met many of them because of our commitment to ensuring that she understood, her mother and I's commitment to ensuring that she was not confused about who she should pay her respects and homage to. So many of these people are still alive, and we should support them. But the absolute best way that we honor them and all the other ones who are not here, Sundiata Acoli, Mutulu Shakur, all the other ones who are not here, there are many others, David Gilbert, many others. The way we support them, the best possible way, even if we never have any contact with them, because I've been able to meet and engage with a lot of these people on the screen. But even if you never do that, including Sister Assata Shakur, and if you want, she actually gave me the opportunity to videotape her when I went to Cuba years ago, and that video is on YouTube if you want to check it out. Assata Shakur speaks about socialism in Cuba. You really want to know what socialism is? You're not going to learn that on MSNBC, but you watch videos like that and read books like Fidel Castro's In Defense of Socialism, you'll come to understand it properly. So you can, even if you don't have contact with these people, the best way to honor them, as Kwame Toure said, is you continue their work. Most of these folks are getting up in age. None of us are going to live forever. We need people to get in position to carry on the tremendous contributions that they've made and continue to make, many of them. So you have to be in organizations to do that. So all of this is irrefutable. Anybody who argues against these points, I suggest you see a therapist immediately, because I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, this is stuff that is just should be second nature to us at this point. So let's please honor our actual troops. Let's do that, and let's stop honoring those that. And I'm not saying abandon those in the U.S. military. I talk to them all the time. I've talked to people in the U.S. military all the time. In fact, a lot of my position has evolved from supporting many of them who are friends of mine, who cannot even, I've driven with them down to Veteran Affairs. I've talked to them. I've heard their stories. One of my best mentors, Brother Cambone here, who was an AAPRP cadre and Black Panther Party member here in Sacramento, was in Vietnam and has written about it and talked about it. And he's the brother who, if you don't know him, Akin Sanya Cambone, he's an artist. He wrote the Black Panther Party's coloring book, which became a national issue in 1968 when the Nixon administration used it to try to paint the Black Panther Party as a terrorist organization. He's the one that drew that book. And I just got through working with him. He's one of the people that recruited me into the All African People's Revolutionary Party years and years ago. And I just got through helping him rewrite the verbiage because he has a publishing company that's going to re-release the Black Panther coloring book. He's been telling me about his experiences in Vietnam for years, and I've heard him go through his struggles getting proper medical treatment through Veteran Affairs and all of those things, him and many other people. So I've seen how much their contributions are respected by the people who claim to support and respect them. Not at all. They're cannon fodder. They're meat grinder. Once they serve their purpose, they don't care what happens to those people. That's why so many of them are on off-ramps. And the people who say they have the bumper stickers on their cars talking about supporting them drive right on by. So we are not saying abandon those people. We're saying talk to them, which I do all the time. Talk to them. I saw a young African the other day in a military uniform walking with a young European. I told both of them, what are y'all? Well, we're soldiers in the army. I'm like, okay, don't let them send you anywhere and get you killed. Oh, we know. I'm like, you know, but you got to have a plan. You better figure out how you can get to Canada or go home to Africa or something. If you want to go home, I can help you do that. I can connect you with people that can help you get there, but you got to have a plan because they're going to try to send you somewhere to get you killed, fighting for something that doesn't benefit you, your family, your community, nothing. So that's what we're saying in a nutshell. And so, as always, the way we conclude you all is we just ask you again, join an organization, political education in your organization, make community defense. And if you don't know what community defense, if you missed that one, we have a video on YouTube about it. You can go to AAPRP's channel, or you go to my personal channel, Jamu Umi, and it's up there. And it's a step-by-step how to organize community defense. As always, willing to work with you to help you do that if you're serious about doing it. If you want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, then we invite you to do that. You can, if you're on Zoom and you want to do that, you can go ahead and reach out to us and we'll contact you. If you're on Facebook and you want to make I want to join the APRP, we'll follow up with you and we'll do that. So join some organization. We invite you to join the APRP. If you're not African and you want to start an organization working to build, we'll do everything we can to help you do that, because organization, again, decides everything. And we want to point you in the direction of aprp-intl.org, our international site. It has information about our work around the world. I mentioned the organizations that we engage and work with, so you can find out more about that. Africa is burning up right now, and our people are on the ground engaged in those struggles to wage war for our liberation. So you can find out about that on our page. The second one, at betterworld.me, that's my blog. Again, just posted an article today, a critical assessment of the Black Lives Matter movement. We need to talk about Black Lives Matter in a concrete way, not any of this nonsense that's all over social media, whether it pay anybody that says that some European man is going to finance a mass movement. Clearly, you know nothing about mass movements. We need to stop talking about that nonsense. There are those of us who have worked in mass movements for years. You don't know what you're talking about. So shut up and read a book and learn something. So the article today that I wrote is based on giving more of an objective analysis about Black Lives Matter. It's a mass movement. A lot of people don't even know the difference between movements and parties. That you got to understand that. A movement, like people say, well, Black Lives Matter, they should have a clear, definitive objective. That it's a movement. No movement has a clear, definitive objective because it has all kinds of people with different beliefs in it. So read that and other things. And then Hood Communist is another outstanding site of African revolutionary writings. And I'm blessed to have the opportunity to write there as well. So we ask you to join on with that. So Shakur, I don't know if there's anything we need to address before we go. If you see anything.
I just want to shout out Glenn. He said, I love how this is helping me to move to a more radical position emotionally and mentally and action. Excellent.
Excellent. I see some positive comments. That's really cool. I mean, that's what we need, you know? So yeah, we definitely, that's the best news you can give us, is that you're radicalizing yourself. Continue to get radical. Continue to do that. Radical, these are good words, you all. Radical is a good word. Revolutionary is a good word. Socialist is a good word. Communist is a good word. Pan-Africanist is a good word. All of these things are great words. We just have to understand what they mean. And when we understand what they mean, we know that they're great words. So we don't run away from any of them. I hear people say, well, I don't go by labels. Well, that's because you don't know what they mean. That's why you don't go by it. Everybody goes by labels. You know, you don't call yourself a human being? You know, I mean, everybody goes by labels, you know, but you don't know what it means. That's a good way to stay away from it because you don't have to be accountable to it. I don't have a problem. I'm all of those things. Radical, socialist, communist, Pan-Africanist, revolutionary. Those are all great words. Bad words are 4th of July, American identity, American patriotism. Those are negative things. Patriot of the U.S. Those are extremely negative things. Red, white, and blue, that's a negative thing. That's a negative flag. Good for nothing except providing heat when you burn it. That's the only practical purpose that it serves. So we're not afraid to say that. I know some of you are, but hopefully by us saying it can help you say it, because what we want to do is create an environment where a whole lot of people are saying it. And of course, we understand that the more we say it, the more people are gonna, rise up against us. But Sekou Toure said, if no one's doing anything against you, it's because you're not doing anything. So I'm proud of the fact we got a lot of enemies. We got a lot of haters against us. And that's a beautiful thing. I love that. And in fact, if I go too long without getting some hatred, I start to wonder what I'm doing wrong. So we, as Cat Williams said, quoting the great philosopher Cat Williams, if you got 15 haters by March, you got to figure out how to get to 20 by June. And if you're advancing radical, revolutionary political analysis, you're going to have haters. And you just have to develop a comfort level with that, because that means you're doing the right thing. My grandmother told me, boy, you don't want everybody to like you. And she had no idea how right she was. I had to grow to understand how right she absolutely was. I don't want everybody to like me. And in fact, some people, I want them to have absolute hatred towards me, because that means I'm living for justice. Jesus had haters. So, because he was living for justice, and I want to live up to that example. So, everyone have a great Sunday. Have a great rest of the evening. We'll have another topic out for next week. We really appreciate you joining. Tell people if you liked it. Tell people if you didn't like it. Stay strong, maintain your mental, physical, and spiritual health, and forward ever, backwards never. We will talk to you next week.